Hey everyone, since we get a ton of questions about glue and what glues we use, we decided to show you exactly all the 5 glues that we use and the applications of them. So first glue, it's a company called Golden. This is the extra heavy gloss, and there's heavy gloss, but it's just a really thick acrylic medium that we use for certain flowers. Next up we have this US Art Quest. It's a PPA matte glue. It's a very thin glue. This is usually sometimes used for recreating flowers, specifically for petals. My favorite is the Line Co. Neutral pH. This I use literally for almost everything. It comes in various sizes. The spray adhesive I do use, this is by Gorilla. I don't like using it too much because it emits a lot of VOCs, but I do have to use it for certain applications, and I'll show you. And then last but not least, it's always good to have a trusty little hot glue gun, and I'll show you what we use for that. This is by Gorilla as well. So those are the 5 glues that we use. I also like to use these little, just whatever ramekins, plastic ramekins. I put the glue in, and this is like a silicone tray that we use as well. Basically I like to kind of let the glue run down on a side so it's not filling the whole thing, so you can reuse multiple different sides of the container, and you can put your paintbrush on there. Paintbrush real quick. I always have a small, medium, and large, so kind of a small tip for petal recreation and using on petals just because it's thinner, it's a more fine tip. My trusty one, this is like it's a still loose bristle, but just kind of fatter head. And then I have this really thick one, and it's pretty stiff, and I use that when I use the heavy gloss thick glue. So now I'll just show you literally some flowers that we use with all these different applications. And one note, if you are using the glue adhesive or the spray adhesive, make sure you're using a protective mask. I'm going to show you how to glue a poppy pod. They are quite thick, and if you see in the center, there's a lot of it's not flat at all, and there's a lot of space in there, so it's going to be hard to put any of my regular glue, the Line Co, on this because you don't have too much surface area that's going to cover. So we would use the hot glue gun because it's going to fill the cavity, and you'll get basically a nice surface area for it to glue on to paper or glass. Super easy. You literally are just going to go through and go on the sides first. You have to be somewhat quick with hot glue guns because they dry quickly. So you can be pretty generous with the poppy pods. I don't use hot glue guns often. And then the cavity is filled, the edges all have glue on them, and you just hold it for 5-10 seconds while it cures and cools, and it goes pretty quick. And after that, that'll be set, and it'll continue to cure. So here's your poppy pod. Next glue that we're going to show you is the Golden Extra Heavy Gel Gloss, and I'll show you the consistency of it real quick. It's again super duper thick. It doesn't fall off your brush. It's just a really thick paste. Yeah, this is what we would use for a straw flower. I'm not going to actually put it on the straw flower because I do want to use this flower in a piece, but you would literally get a nice big chunk of it, and you would spread it all over the center of the straw flower, and you would also go a bit onto the actual straw flower petals, and so you're just kind of gently is the key word, spreading the paste all over the flower. I usually start on the center of the flower and then work outward. You do that until the full flower is covered, and then you also have about halfway up the petals will be glue as well, and then you would put that down, and this is where we also would put a weight on. No, I'm gonna grab the weight. Some of you have seen this weight in some of my videos, but I usually push it down with my finger and just get it sticking on the paper a bit, and then I would throw a piece of mat board on top, and I would use a weight to seal that down. Just because straw flowers are just big and kind of more 3D-esque instead of really flat, and so I just want everywhere that I put glue to be actually adhering onto the paper. I don't use it that much, or you can use it for really large flowers that have a really big center, like sunflowers is a great example, again, of what I would probably do with this. Again, I'm not going to glue on this sunflower because it is a perfectly pressed sunflower that I will be using in a piece. But again, you just get a nice big chunk of the paste, and you would start again from inside the center of the sunflower and just work outwards. You don't want to start from the petals and go inwards because you're most likely going to probably tear a petal off. But again, rule of thumb, kind of with any flower, is start from the center and just continue working your way out. Moving on, I'm going to show you why I use spray adhesive. I don't like to use it often, but I do need to use it in some cases. Let's say heather, for example. Nothing's necessarily like flat, and sometimes like these things can like just fall off really easily. I don't want things coming off in a piece, and this is where a spray adhesive is nice because the adhesive will spray everywhere on the flower, and it'll cover every single piece of surface area that needs to be covered. So remember, when you're using spray adhesive, have a mask so you're not breathing in the VOCs. I always would lay down a larger piece of paper or cardboard. So this would be like quite a bit bigger because your spray is going to come out as a spray, not directly on it. So have a big piece of paper, and literally all you do is just get a nice coat, wait about 20 seconds till you actually put it on whatever surface that you're using, either glass or paper, and that's about it. It sticks quite quickly. Using spray glue is a little difficult because of how quickly it does dry. You don't have much wiggle room once it's on the paper. Just note that once it does hit the surface, it's going to be there. Spray glue just allows the whole surface of whatever I'm using to be covered with the glue. Now for the bread and butter glue. This is literally what I use for 99% of all of my gluing, is the Line Co. Neutral pH adhesive. I love this stuff. It's awesome. So this is what we're going to use primarily for the rest of the video. We'll start with thin flowers, thin petal flowers that usually only have one layer of petals. So Amaranthus is quite a thin flower once it's actually all pressed, because usually you only have about one layer of petals on it. Same thing with like poppies. You have to be careful with really thin, transparent petals. And I'll show you how I actually glue these, and it should help you. So one thing to note when you're gluing flowers, you'll start in the center of the flower. I'm not gonna put glue all the way to the edges of the Amaranthus or anything that has really thin petals, because if you put it on glass, you're gonna see the glue through the petals. And so with something like this, with the Amaranthus, I'm literally only gonna glue the center and then just about this ring that you can see, I'll glue up to the ring because the ring is a little bit darker than the petals, and so you won't be able to see all the glue coming through the petals. I always have this on an angle in a little ramekin just because it's not covering the whole surface of this ramekin. It's just personal preference. You can do whatever you want. I just like doing this. Get a little bit of glue. Don't fill your whole paintbrush with glue, especially for the thinner flowers, because you need to be able to control the amount of glue that you're putting on. Remember, when you're putting a flower on a piece of glass or a piece of paper, if you have big clumps of glue on the flower, it's going to spread. You don't want that. You want to be able to control your glue that's on the flower. And I have my ring, and so I'm just kind of starting at where that like darker ring was. And I have this little piece of chipboard because I can just maneuver it really easily. You have to go really gently. Make sure to spread it evenly. Don't have big clumps of glue sitting on the flower. And you don't need too much. There's enough on there, and this will be plenty. And there you go. So now you can't see any of the glue marks on the petals because I literally just put glue up to this darker ring here, all in there. And that works really well for thin petal flowers. With ranunculus, all ranunculus, I do start from the center. I like to hold the outsides. I like to just dab a little bit on the center first just to get some glue going, and then I will continue to work from the center and outwards. And I'll just spin my piece of paper and continue going from the center outward. And you don't have to go all the way. You don't have to put the glue all the way to the edges of the petals, but I did about 3/4 of the way. This also allows you to, like, if you're doing overlaps and underlays and stuff like that, you have room to put something underneath. That's a key kind of note. You don't really want to put the glue all the way to the edges of the flower. You always want a little space if you decide to use them. Here we have a little Cosmo. Cosmo's super easy, very similar to ranunculus in the way that you'll apply the glue. Get a little dab of glue on your paintbrush, start in the center, and then again, just work your paintbrush outwards. And that little dab of glue is all you needed for this little Cosmo. I get glue on my hands often. If you get that and it's sticking, just be very gentle with peeling the petal off of your finger. And that's it. And you go bup, 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 bup. And that's good. Cosmo. Rachel is holding up a piece of a sweet pea. I'm gonna only put glue on like the double layer side so the glue doesn't become transparent to the main part of the flower. A little bit of glue. Put a little dab toward the base of it, and then again you're going from the center to the edges. I'm not touching the transparent main part of the flower here. Like, I didn't touch this at all with the glue. I just touched this kind of like center part here. Sweet pea. We have a piece of Amaranthus here. Amaranthus is pretty notorious for kind of flaking off. You just have things that can come off really easily. Amaranthus, Celosia, and Astilbe. There's a couple different ways you can glue these. Again, I try to not use the spray glue, but you can very easily just cover the whole thing, the stem and the flower, with spray adhesive, and you'll be done. If you're not into spray glue, then the way you would use this is either the line co glue, or you can use the PPA glue for these. You kind of do a lot of small dabs, and then you'll end up spreading the glue. Get a decent amount of glue on your paintbrush and just dab a bit throughout. And then you can kind of start your spreading slash dab method. You can throw a little bit of glue on the stem. That's kind of all you need to do. Amaranthus. When your paintbrush gets a bunch of seeds and little pieces of petals or flower on it, just take a piece of toilet paper or tissue and just wipe it off. Next flower up is Delphinium. Delphinium's fairly easy. Just put a little dot of glue, get a little more glue on your paintbrush, and then work your way outwards. Super easy. Delphinium. I never put a ton of glue into the ramekin, just a little bit at a time because you don't want it to dry up. Next flower we're going to do is Chamomile. There's not a lot that's holding these petals on to the center of the flower. I'll start in the center and then very carefully kind of hold an edge. I just dab the petals. If you go from the center and then brush it, you risk the chances of actually brushing the petals off. And so I just kind of go straight down onto the petals with a little glue from the paintbrush. And that works well for me because I want to keep the petals intact and complete. And so there you go, like none of the petals came off. That's it. Chamomile. Next up, we have a piece of pink yarrow. This is fairly easy too. The bigger pieces of yarrow are easy. I like to be able to hold the stem when I'm working with flowers just to not get glue all over my hands. And I start at the tops of the yarrow and I kind of cover the petals. You have all these little stems and you probably don't need to put glue on them. Like this should hold the amount of glue I have on the actual buds should hold. But if you're like me and you're a little bit OCD on having everything stay put, I like to then cover the stems with a little bit of glue and you can just kind of just dab it on. If you are putting it on the stems here, you want to be like not putting a lot at all, because if you're putting this on glass, you could have some of it seep out and then you're going to be cleaning that glue off the glass after it dries. So if you are putting it on the stems, just do a really, really light amount of glue. So there you go. Yarrow. We have a piece of stock here. You have to be careful with too because you can end up brushing off some of the petals. So you just have to be careful. Some of these are really thin and you don't want to brush them off. Just be careful with your brush strokes. Just be patient, be gentle. For stock, I will start with the actual flowers and then I will do the stem at the end. I start at the center of the flower and I work outward. And again, I always kind of combine the dab method and the brush stroke method a lot when I glue things. So like I'll dab it on. If I think something's really fragile, I'll dab it on first to test it and then I'll do like a really, really like careful brush stroke on it. Like this little petal here, like I'll just dab a little bit and that's all it needed because it looked like it could have ripped off if I applied a brush stroke on it. I think that's a good way to go about it, is like dab and brush, dab and brush. Dab is used for testing out if the petal's going to come off or not. After all the flowers have glue on them, I just go back and I put a little glue on the main stem. Make sure there's no puddles of glue. And then you do your little finger roll method. And there you go. Stock. So here we have a anemone. Anemone Anemone Anatomy. So before I glue these down, I usually put it on a piece of paper and I kind of slap it on something because you can see all this pollen that came off. And if you're doing this on glass, that pollen can easily rub off on glass when you frame it. So I just literally do small, gentle slaps and we're good. That's what I do with the anemone. The anemone is also pretty easy in terms of gluing. I always start in the center. I kind of put a little glue in the center, get a little bit more glue on the brush, and then work outwards. And this one again, I just do kind of like halfway, 3/4 of the way on the petals. And there you go. The anemone. I'm going to show you how I glue daisies. They can be a little bit tough because the center of some daisies tend to just fall apart. So this is kind of a 2 glue method that I do with these. First and foremost, I'll glue it on the paper, and then there's a second thing I'll show you. Start in the center, put a little glue, and just be gentle. Make sure you're not gonna pull out any of the petals while you're brushing outward onto the petals. That's as much glue that I need to put on. Throw it on your glass or paper. African daisies kind of keep their center well, but some daisies do not at all, and they seriously like crumble if you touch them, and that's super, super frustrating. When it comes to some daisies, if you're finding that the center is kind of coming off, this is where we actually do use the PPA matte glue. Put a little bit in the ramekin, and all of these glues dry clear, but I'll take the finer paintbrush and I'll put a little bit of glue on the fine tip paintbrush, and I'll literally go and I'll spread a little tiny thin layer on the center of the daisy, and it'll dry clear. This just ensures that those seeds aren't going to fall out any more than they have. And by the end of this video, I'll show you it should be dry and clear. So we'll just let that be, and I'll show you later. But this ensures that the seeds aren't going to fall out anymore, and everything will stay intact. Here we have a beautiful rose. It's the same method that you use for the anemone or most flowers. I use the Lineco glue for roses, and all you do with these guys is, again, put a dab of glue in the center, and then you'll work outwards. And that's literally about it. Again, I'm not going to go full bleed with the glue. I go about 3/4 of the way onto the petal, and you'll be totally fine. Here we have it is a California poppy that was once a nice orange, but it faded, and like they just do. California poppies will fade. I still love California poppies. Even if they fade, they still look absolutely gorgeous because they have like this super awesome contrast with these orange centers and then this like nice, really, really light, transparent yellow. Again, you're dealing with something really, really thin, like a really thin poppy petal, and it's super transparent. So I'm just gonna dab a little bit of glue on the back of the center and just do a little bit off the center, so it's actually onto the petals, but I don't want much at all because I don't want the glue showing through that. And we'll throw him down. California poppy. And the last thing that I wanted to show you was the African daisy. This is where I had put the really, really thin PPA glue on the center of it because those seeds can come out quite easily. And you can see that it's nice and clear. It doesn't distract from the color of the center. And that's about it. That is gluing 101, that should get you started, but honestly, the line coat, you should buy this. It's awesome. Everything else is secondary. You can get away with, honestly, using line coat for almost everything. I just am particular about things sticking down on paper or glass, and so I make sure I have all of the glues that I possibly need. But as you can see, everything is nice and stuck. The hot glue gun with the poppy pad, I would use that. It is, I'd say, the only way to do it. I wouldn't be able to use any of the other methods with the poppy pod. But all these other flowers, line coat all the way. Yeah, you should be able to glue almost anything that you want to. So thank you.